Okay, folks, we're going to get started. So the topic today is the 3 Ps of the future of an augmented world: predictions, privacy, and pervasiveness. So we have a distinguished panel here, and I'd like to introduce each one to you. To my far right is Cecilia Abadie. Now, Cecilia, it might be known for one specific incident, but I want to tell you that she is the founder, developer at 33 Labs. She's a Google Glass community leader. She's a pioneer and explorer, speaker, and developer. She's also known for the first person to ever get pulled over by a police officer for wearable technology.
Thanks for taking them for the team.
Now, I want to tell you that I am actually a police officer myself, and I'll tell you why I'm involved in AR in a minute. But I actually interviewed Cecilia, and she told me she was speeding, but she was wearing her Google Glass, and they were not activated. And we'll get into that a little bit later on. But she was exonerated. She was found not guilty of the charges. When I interviewed her, and I have a podcast, she admitted she was speeding, and I told her after, I said, don't ever admit something like that because you just proved your guilt. And she said, well, I don't care, I'm honest. And then she wound up beating the speeding ticket anyway, so I don't know how that happened. So, but Cecilia's a very intelligent, wonderful person, and she's much more than the person that got pulled over for wearing Google Glass, so I want to make that known. Sitting to her left is Robert Hernandez. Robert Hernandez is a web journalist. He's assistant professor at USC Annenberg School for Communications and Journalism, and he really brings awesome perspective of augmented reality and an augmented world in journalism, so I really look forward to hearing Robert's thoughts. To his left is going to be Brian Wassom. Brian, I'm sure you know because he's been a big person here at AWE for some years. Brian is partner, chair of social, mobile, and emerging media practice group at Honigman, Miller, Schwartz, and Cohen. He's also the secretary at augmentedreality.org. He really is the top, what I consider the top legal expert in the augmented space. He has a website, augmentedlegality.com and wassom.com. And actually last year I was supposed to moderate a panel and I lost my voice, and that's not always a good thing when you're moderating a panel. So Brian stepped in, and actually I think he did a better job than me, so that was really good. So I really look forward to hearing from Brian also. And then finally, last but not least, we have Pete Wassell. Pete is the owner of Augmate Corporation, and he is a digital eyewear platform champion. Pete has been very instrumental at AWEs in the past and this year. He actually ran the Hackathon Challenge, so I think that as we start talking about the future of where this augmented world is going, I think that some of his insights with this Hackathon Challenge and kind of seeing where the latest eyewear and some of the wearable technology merged in with augmented reality is going to get very interesting. So my name is Joseph Rampolla. I told you I'm a police officer in New Jersey. I focus in cybercrime. I'm not here to talk about that. But everything I say does not represent my police department, so I want to let you know that. But I actually run a podcast called the Augmented Reality Dirt Podcast. It's a podcast focused on emerging technology and how it influences society, cybercrime, and our legal system. And we basically interview experts from all over the world talking about an augmented world and how we can push this technology forward in the right direction. So I think it's only appropriate that we talk about these sort of things and kind of look at some of the challenges that we have. And as you know, when we start getting into some of the privacy issues and some of the predictions and what we've seen so far with emerging technologies and looking into the future, that this is a really important discussion that needs to be done right here and now. So the way we're going to kind of lay this out, just so everybody knows, this is actually going to be a participation situation. So we hope that you're going to actually, as we start talking, that you guys start to develop some really burning questions that you want to raise regarding this topic, because it is so important. So that's for starters. I'm going to ask our panelists to just briefly speak for a few minutes, just to kind of describe themselves and kind of talk about the perspective of where they come from, which will give you a good idea of a little bit more in depth about their background and kind of how these 3 Ps influence them and kind of their perspective on what they want to tell you and how they see technology changing and how it's going to affect all of our lives. So let's start out. Cecilia, why don't you give us a little thumbnail about yourself?
Okay, so I was waiting for the new technological wave. We all know that technology does come in waves. And when I saw wearables, I kind of had a feeling that that was the right way for me. I know augmented reality wave has been out there for 20 years, and people have been trying to do this for the longest time. But the difference with particularly Google Glass, which is the first device we started developing as far as wearables, is that Google Glass is a wearable device that you can actually wear, and you will see people out in the street that are wearing Google Glass all day long or for parts of their days. And that's what kind of brought us into that platform. And we developed different systems, starting for a personal trainer. We believe it's a very personal technology, and we believe in augmenting, connecting, and extending the person with wearable technology. We don't think wearables are a fad, and you probably all agree here because you're in the right place. We think it's a natural evolution of how technology has this curve of going from being huge and expensive and exclusive to actually becoming more available and closer to us. And we always want technology closer and closer because it really augments us and extends us and it connects us. So for those reasons, is that we're choosing it as a platform, and now we're also developing for Moverio. We're also strongly feeling this is the year of smartwatches. Those are not going to be as good for augmented reality. We might not have the technology ready for commercial right now, augmented reality. That's a little bit of the way we see it, and we are more building what I call context augmentation, which is not per se technically augmented reality, but it's something that can help in different areas and for individuals as well.
Robert, now just so you know, I had my reading glasses on, so I didn't see Robert sitting to the far there. So Robert, you're up next.
Hello. This is actually a long time coming for me. This is my fourth AWE, and my background is journalism. Kind of not supposed to be here, I think, unless I'm covering you guys. I've been at USC as a digital journalism professor for about 5 years this summer, and I've always nerded out over technology. I hijack technology for journalism. That's my specialty. And been watching AR grow, and when I came to the first augmented reality event, ARE, was it something like that? I was blown away where we were as a community, and I include myself in the community now, and how it's leaped and grown. The tone towards wearables is very different. When Glass came out, there was a kind of like, what is Google doing in our turf? And now it's very much integrated. My interest is trying to create relevant, informative content, informational content for my community. That's the mission of journalism. I'm trying to inform the community so they could be, to foster democracy and inform people to make better decisions. And to me, it doesn't matter if it's in a paper form or a pixel form, whether you're holding it in your hand or it's on your face. I want to be proactive in trying to figure out how can I reach my community and serve my community wherever they are, whether they're on Snapchat, whether they're on the subway with the New York Times print edition or an app in their phone. And so I've been looking at AR, taught a class in augmented reality, or attempted to teach a class in AR, storytelling and journalism, where we augmented the Los Angeles Central Branch library. The app is officially out. It just got approved last night, so feel free to download it. It's called Archive LAPL. With the Los Angeles Public Library, where you can download and, with your device, experience the library, stories, information. We augmented art. We augmented a whole bunch of cool stuff. And wearables, to me, when it came out a year ago, and I saw the contest to win the privilege to buy Glass, I said, well, let's throw a tweet out there and see what happens. And I did get the ability to get Glass. And I see AR and wearables coming together. And for me, that's a natural place for a storyteller, whether it's journalism or not, to try to create relevant content. Since my first AWE, it was very much developers developing the technology and then thinking about the content. Then the way I interpreted the narrative, hey, in order to sustain this, we need to make some money, so let's do some marketing business side. How do we keep it from being gimmicky? That was a big theme last year, and now I think storytelling is very much growing. And for me, from my perspective, one of the panels I submitted that didn't get selected was how can non-developers create AR experiences? And that's from my perspective. I use your platforms. I'm not a developer. I'm not a coder. I've been fortunate to be mentored by a few of you, that I see in the audience to help develop this platform so it's a medium opposed to just technology. So that's my interest, the merger of all these things. Thanks.
Brian?
I think I've been destined for this industry since I was 8 years old and declared that I wanted to be a cyborg when I grew up. My approach to this industry is very much as an aficionado, as someone who wants to see this succeed. I think the gut reaction I get a lot of times is, "Oh, you're the lawyer. You're here to come crash the party." But to the contrary, what I want to accomplish is helping innovators in this space and navigate the legal challenges so that we can create an industry that accomplishes its potential. And I think we could have come up with a lot of P's to describe what we see in the industry. Potential is certainly what we have right now, and Robert used another P, being proactive. I think that's something that describes what all of us do here and what many of you do as well. And I try to be proactive in the sense of thinking ahead. I've been blogging at augmentedlegality.com for a few years now, since really before the second AWE was held, and just thinking about these issues that only now are starting to come into fruition. And we can talk about some of them, but I and some others have been speculating about the legal issues that the industry will run into once it's mature enough, and it's exciting because now we're actually seeing it mature. And the P that I'm here to primarily talk about is this issue of privacy. Again, not to crash the party, but because we have to acknowledge the fact that this is the barrier we're running into, the barrier to adoption, and really the complicating factor in how all of this is going to affect society, because every device, every app, every digital experience we sign on to nowadays, we're signing away to the fine print to give away a little bit of our information. And we know we're doing that. We're okay with that. But eventually that's going to add up so that there's no real private information left. And we have to talk about what society looks like when we hit that point. Not that it's a good or a bad thing, but it's a thing, and we need to acknowledge that. And talk about tweets when the Google Glass program came out. That's the tweet I put out. Saying, I'm really interested in exploring the privacy issues. I didn't win a glass. I had to get it later.
Get to the back of the line.
Hello, my name is Pete Wassell. I've got a company in New York City called Augmate, and we connect databases and enterprise software to digital eyewear. So I come from the standpoint, it's my belief that really this technology will take off more in the industrial sector. So we work with the verticals, the B2B industrial kind of companies. We think then it'll trickle down into the consumer side of things. We see a lot of advantages with digital eyewear. The fact that it has a camera, I think, is a really great thing. We think that it's going to enhance people and let them perform better. A number of really great applications can be built around the technology. So we see it from that standpoint. I actually wrote a law with Steve Mann. He's one of the founders of augmented reality and digital eyewear, about really being an advocate for people to be able to use this technology and have this technology, and making a good case for why it should really be available. I got interested in AR. I was at IBM, and I started going to a meetup in New York City in December of 2009, run by the guy who runs this conference, Ori Inbar. So he had a meetup called ARNI, Augmented Reality New York, and there were things that I didn't like about the technology. So I didn't like the fact that it was on a smartphone. I didn't think that was the right platform. I thought digital eyewear, even at that time, would be a better platform. I didn't like the gimmicky aspect of it. So there were applications where you'd hold up a smartphone to, let's say, a Pepsi can and be able to play a game or get marketing campaign information. I really thought that the technology could be used for practical and useful kind of applications, and that's what I believe today. So that's my background.
Thank you very much. I just want to kind of add to what Pete just mentioned, because he talked about this Augmented Reality of New York meetup, and I just want to mention that as a member of the ARNI meetup, which actually is the largest meetup in the world, one of the interesting things is all over the world right now, there are these AR and augmented world meetups that are taking place. I think they're really important because, as you know, as you network with all of the people here throughout this conference and how important that networking is, these ARNI meetups, or these augmented reality meetups, are like seeds that really blossom. And what we're starting to see now is starting to connect these leaders of each of these meetups. So if you're not a part of a meetup in your area, check it out, because you actually can have a very important voice, and some of the people that you meet there are going to become future friends of yours and colleagues that you're going to work and push this forward. So if you don't have one in your area, you can maybe start to think about, getting people together and doing it. So it's really important, actually. The reason why I mentioned that is Brian Wassom started the AR Detroit meetup, and we have a whole bunch of other. Patrick O'Shaughnessy, who did our pre-conference as part of the AR Chicago. There's AR Barcelona. There is an AR meetup or an augmenting meetup in London. So there's all of these important ways that you can kind of give back and share. And when I started showing up to the Arnie meetups, I try to say, what can I do? And then by starting to be able to connect people was kind of my biggest asset. And I just want to mention that, because I think that is so important for this community. And I think that why we're having this conversation, and we're going to get to the questions in a second, is that by answering these questions now, we're going to provide a lot of heartache, so we don't need a lot of lawyers to come out of the woodworks and start looking into things. So I just wanted to mention that. So my first question is, and I'm sure everybody has seen the video where it's this augmented world where wherever you walk, you're just bombarded by a million different overlaid visuals in front of you. And I think it's like, in a kitchen, and you see like a McDonald's box, and it just becomes this unbelievable, confusing sort of thing. So my first question to the panel is, like, I was talking to somebody yesterday at our little breakfast gathering where birds of a feather flock together. And one person was mentioning, he said, I don't like Google Glass because it's too small of a field of view. And then you look at some of the other wearables where it's too much of a field of view. And his comment was, how do we know how much stuff we want to, let's say, augment in our field of vision? And of course, we know augmented reality and an augmented world goes well beyond just visuals. But in this instance, what is kind of the sweet spot of information that needs to be put in our field of vision, I guess, is the question. So whoever wants to tackle that. Cecilia.
Like I said before, these are devices that are very, very personal. So you have to be really careful what you push into that field of vision. That's the first thing, and that's, as developers, we always keeping that in mind, especially for the public. When you're in an enterprise environment, I think it's simpler because you're just going to design for a purpose. But when you're out there, you really have to have this design intent of designing for a glance. And that's one of the things that I think Google Glass brought into the picture that is important. That is that design. So it's not only usable because you can wear it for a whole day, but it's also, as far as the user experience, it's very minimalistic. Those are lessons I think we learn. So now, even if we develop for Moverio, for instance, or for another platform, we're still going to keep those UX principles in mind of not bombarding the user. On the other hand, looking a little more in the long term, I think this is going to evolve. If we show a phablet today to a user 10 years ago when the cell phones were starting, they will look at you like you're crazy. But now we want bigger and we want larger phones, and we're comfortable with those. So in the same way, I expect as the technology improves, as the hardware improves, I want bigger visors. I want to have a whole visor, but it has to be really good. It has to be really where we developed all these things that we're going to learn on the way there, of how to, not intrude too much, how not to give too much information, how to make it really comfortable and not distracting, and so I'm not going to be walking and hitting a wall while I'm walking. So all these things are going to evolve. In the future, yes, it's going to be like in the movies, and it's going to be all those things happening at the same time, and it's going to be, because it seems like the planet is becoming more and more aware of itself, something that I really love. So with the Internet of Things, you combine all these things together, and there's going to be so much information, but we're going to learn how to do it right.
I'll tell you what, you think about who owns your field of view, and I think each individual person should own their field of view. Now, when you look at things in the news recently, Facebook bought the Oculus Rift, right? Google does things like driverless cars, okay? Now, why do you think these companies are interested in these kinds of technologies, right? So Google owns search, right? That's what they do. Facebook owns social. Why would they make these kinds of decisions? It's because they really want to own your eyeballs, right? Because, if you've got Oculus Rift, then that's kind of a captive audience. If you've got a driverless car, well, damn be sure you've got more time to be looking at, Google kind of stuff, right? So you got to kind of think about it from that perspective. I think there's only so much information that the human brain can really absorb. So having an infinite amount of information in front of you, I don't think would be very useful, perhaps dangerous. I got into this because really, I wanted to create a clickable world. So I wanted the ability, just like you've got a computer and you right-click on your certain items to get more information, I'd like the ability to do the same thing. The world is your desktop, and having more information about things is great, but it's got to be, on my terms. I don't want to be bombarded with advertisements, for sure.
I think it's also going to vary by culture. If you look at websites in the U.S., really minimal websites in Asia and other places, if there's white space on the website, that website or that article or that newspaper publication is considered weak and soft and amateur. So just at different tones of how we have a conversation culturally, all those things are going to vary. There's not going to be one answer. What I hope we reach is I, as a user, get to control my experience when I want something to be forced in front of me because I allowed it, or in other times I'm opting in, trying to get smart enough to know when I want noise and when I really want that signal and that ratios. It's going to change every hour on what you're doing. What is your intent at this very moment? So it's hard to answer. But.
Great. Brian?
The only thing I'd add is the sweet spot is whatever you want it to be. You measure it by how many times you walk down the sidewalk or wherever else in the course of the day and say, gee, I wish I could click on that. That's what you want to be augmented.
Okay. Now, I'm sure most people in the room saw Robert Scoble's his keynote presentation. One of the things that he talked about is in the 1990s, it was the Internet of Content. In the 2000, it was the Internet of People. In 2010, it was the Internet of Things for that. So my question is he talks about 2250 as the Internet of the human body. So we have a long way to go before we get there. But what do we see rolling out? And I know that I want to just give the caveat that nobody likes to make predictions, because if you think you know where technology is moving, you're really going to be in the wrong direction. But what does the panel think of the next movement down that road?
Well, as far as the Internet of Things goes, the key word is things there, but the truth is, what's really important is people, right? So the way that people interact, let's say, with the Internet of Things, I think is really what's important. When we talk about, being bombarded with things and whatnot, it's when interfaces disappear is when things get really kind of, interesting. I think digital eyewear at this point in time is kind of that bridge between the Internet of Things and humans. So the ability, perhaps, for machines to talk to humans. When we go into factories and that kind of thing, there's sensors that can tell the uptime of particular factory equipment, the error codes, having maintenance schedules on equipment. There's sensors that are able to show by Bluetooth the temperature or vibration or those types of things on equipment, and then communicating that with humans. So that's kind of like important. So I think that's the real takeaway, that there's the Internet of Things, but it's got to be to the benefit of humans and humankind.
Whatever name you want to give to the type of internet we're in now, the fundamentals driving the growth of the technology and how we use it are the same, which is follow the money. These companies that are enabling the technology will put it in and promote it in areas that can get them the most money. In the noughts, we saw a huge growth in social media because social media companies realized that they could build up a wealth of information about you through enticing you to submit your own information in social media. We're all familiar with the axiom that if you don't pay for it, you're not the customer, you're the product. We have been the product in social media. And each one of these sites, that the more robust, unique, and detailed of a set of data that they build up about you and about other individuals, the more they can charge to advertisers to have access to that information, to give you targeted advertising. The social media space is getting to where it's saturated. So as Pete says, they need to go to where the other places are that your eyeballs are. There's just testimony in front of the FTC this past week where, it was admitted that, Google and other companies, they have they see down the road. They don't have a near-term plans, but they see in the medium-term future putting advertisements on your thermostat, on your car dashboard, on your refrigerator. All the places where they're right now laying the infrastructure groundwork with the Internet of Things technology, and with that infrastructure will come advertising. And again, well, there's a unique land grab to get those surfaces that aren't currently being monetized and monetize them. So that's what will drive the adoption and the rollout of this technology.
Just to add, I completely agree to what you both said. Just to add that it also has to go with the human nature. The things that really work, like people like to gossip, and that's why Facebook works, and like to know what other people are doing. This is a human nature, so it is true. The industry will drive it, but the people have to have the interest. And with the Internet of Things, we have the interest on controlling everything that is around us because we are lazy and it would be more comfortable. And we want to spend less time with messing with things and doing what we really want, which I think is going to bring an era of more creativity. And this happened with even washing machines, liberating women to actually be able to read and do other things, because before they're doing the home chores. So I think this is going to really release us to do much more creative things in the future, which is going to be a whole new industry there too.
That's great. For me, I feel like I'm a nerd and I'm supposed to like the Internet of Things, but I don't. I don't care that my milk is low and it's going to talk to my toaster. That's the example that they give, and I'm not sold on that idea. But I do love the idea that I'm not sure it's about the money, because when Facebook started, it wasn't about the money. In fact, it was about girls or something at the start. And then money came because everyone was addicted to that product. This needs to be addictive because of human nature, because it just facilitates that speed to that I don't have to pull my phone out of my pocket to take a picture. People don't realize how important that is or how valuable that is. Or one of the things that Glass does is I can just say, okay, Glass, how do I say hello in Mandarin? Go ahead and do it with your phone. I'm going to beat you to it because it's going to tell me, right? So this access to information, to me, is the most valuable, has the highest potential. Now, what is that information or the quality of information? That's where content creators and all these industries are trying to do, and then connect them. But yeah, I think that's probably the best argument, to free you up to do other things. But Internet of Things, milk, toaster, whatever.
I love it. I love that. Good. All right. While I'm going to ask my next question, I hope that I'm going to call on the audience and ask for some questions in a second. So I hope that there's some people out there that have some burning questions. This is the time to ask them. So right before I pick on somebody, I want to throw this one last question out. And I'm so happy we got this far without talking about privacy. Okay, so I'm really happy about that. Okay. we want to get into the privacy issue, and I think one of the interesting things is talking about kind of data leakage. And let's face it, and whether you know it or not, Robert, wherever you go, you're giving information about what kind of milk you like and how often your toaster might be used eventually if you have some type of thing hooked up to your electric. But we're start looking at all of this data leakage and how much information is out there, and there's been some interesting discussions out there about people trying to take control of your data, and because there's such a value on it, and big companies, and as we talked about some of these really big companies, there's a lot of money in tracking those data, and we're no longer tracking cookies anymore, and that was the big thing, and now we're into really this whole stream that's going out there. So my question is, and it's kind of a multi-pronged question to each of you from different disciplines. We look at like the paparazzi, and we look at maybe some of the journalism out in Europe that was hacking into people's accounts, and law enforcement helped them actually too. I don't want to not say that. But, you know, we start to look at that, and then we kind of look at some of the other privacy issues of, you know, all of this data that's out there and up at the cloud and going out there. That is like real important information that somebody else can use for their advantage for sales and that sort of thing. What are we going to see, or what kind of responsibility do we have to try to prevent that, and can we stop this incredible stream, and will we kind of see the pendulum maybe swing the other way to kind of control that data to protect people's privacies, or do people just give up on protecting their privacy?
Well, when it comes to digital eyewear, and that's, you know, it's what I really care about, there's talk about all sorts of different kinds of applications and things perhaps you wouldn't even expect. There's been talk of, let's say, a whiplash index. So, for example, to be able to know, because someone's got an accelerometer, right, on their digital eyewear and a gyroscope, that you turned your head to look at something, and then capture that to be able to tell someone, like, let's say, a marketer, that, hey, someone's looking at something, or to even recognize that the person is staring at something for a long time and pop up some sort of, you know, information, because knowing, oh, that person, that's caught that person's interest. So there's a whole, you know, creepiness kind of factor that could potentially exist. And I don't think anyone, you know, wants to be a part of that. You know, but I do believe that every individual has a right to have digital eyewear, have a camera on their digital eyewear, to be able to use it. There's always been personal use for having a camera. I think some of these scenarios that you see in the newspapers, the headlines are really silly, like about wearing Google Glass in a bar or something. You know, I could take, if I'm in a bar, I could take out my camera and take a picture. And whether it's more discreet or not, you know, do you want a bunch of pictures of, you know, people drunk at a bar? You know, who really cares? Is that really going to happen? So I think some of these things are, you know, blown out of proportion. They'll kind of sort themselves out. I think there's a trade-off to technology and privacy, and it's one of those things that, you know, we're just going to have to navigate the waters and tread and take it day by day.
Yeah, the specific question is, are we going to see a reaction? How are we going to see the pendulum shift back? How are we going to see society react to these issues? And I have three thoughts on that. The first is we'll react to it by passing laws. And that could be on either side of the issue. Pete mentioned the statute that he drafted for the New York legislature, actually proactively protecting the right to surveil and use personal recording technology. We've seen for decades, we've seen Congress pass knee-jerk reactions to specific privacy issues that get hyped up. So we have, you know, the specific statute to protect children's interests online. It's called COPA. We have the Stored Communications Act, so when people got all concerned about third parties accessing your email. So now we have a specific statutory protection around that. It's hard to have a universal statutory protection of privacy because of the First Amendment, because of this presumption in our society that information is free to be shared, and we're free to express ourselves however we want. So carving out little zones of privacy becomes actually difficult. That's a different issue. The second is our expectations. A lot of the law that's actually enforced by the courts is common law. It's not anything that's passed, written down in a statute, but it's a case-by-case application by judges of certain principles of privacy and how they apply to any given situation that's presented to them. We have certain common law causes of action for invasion of privacy, such as intrusion into our seclusion, which is what we normally think of when we think of invading privacy. And there are others. I won't get into them for interest of time. But those are all judged by what a reasonable person would expect to be private. It's called a reasonable expectation of privacy. And as these technologies become more and more ubiquitous, more and more pervasive, that expectation is going to change. A generation ago, if you asked somebody if it was reasonable to be recorded on 400 different video cameras between when you left your house to get groceries and when you came back, they would say, no, that's horrible, that's Orwellian. Now we call that Kroger. Security cameras are ubiquitous. We're okay with that. They're everywhere. We don't think about it. We don't mind. Similarly, when we're wearing wearable technology that has recording, as we get comfortable with that, as we digest that as a society, that's going to be more acceptable. And then the third thought is we can actually turn the tables a bit and use this technology to protect our privacy interests, the things that we consider important just as much. And there are some interesting demos available online, for example, to use glass to visualize where all the security cameras are. So I see that there's this camera down here, and I see a projection on my view screen and my wearable that says, okay, here's the cone that this camera can record. Or I get a beep when I see that there's a Bluetooth low energy proximity sensor nearby, and it shows me, I see a visual representation of its boundaries, and maybe I get additional information on top of that of here's the type of information that this sensor records. Do you want to agree to that? Yes or no? That becomes a much more accessible, much more understandable, and therefore effective means of obtaining consent than we see in the small print privacy policies that we click on in today's mobile apps.
Brian, I just want to jump in real quick because you mentioned about the laws too, and I think we have to remember too, and it goes along with this, that the United States laws are different from international laws in other countries too, and that even makes it more complicated because every country is different and they have their own their own privacy laws that are going on too, and it even muddies the water even more, and that was just the point I wanted to make. Yep.
You want to add?
Okay. So even if privacy has a lot of advocates, so I like to talk a lot about transparency, which is the other side of the coin, and transparency has amazing power and value. So sometimes we're so worried on protecting the information, which is a valid thing. I think we should have our right to protecting our information, especially what our metadata as we go online and we do all this, and we have no idea what's happening with all of that. We have the right to protect that, but at the same time, when we share our medical information, when we share our genetic maybe information, there's amazing potential for science to advance. There's amazing, even politically, I believe, when there's transparency. But not only, right now we're being looked at. What if we can look at the government? What if we can look into organizations? I believe there's a value there that we have to understand. When we understand the value of transparency, not only liberating personally, I tried to live a life of transparency for the last years, and it really frees you because I'm not afraid. I mean, the worst thing that will happen is someone will post a picture that I don't like, and it's okay. I'll try to change whatever it is that I don't like. I don't try to change the picture or my friends sharing it. That's impossible. There's things we cannot control, but if we go into and we move as society into transparency, I think it's an amazing value for democracy. We should be looking at what lobbyists are doing. We should be looking at what governance is doing. We should be looking at all those things, and those should be transparent. So that's where I think the value is, more focusing on transparency and how to learn to live in transparent societies. I grew up in a military dictatorship in South America. You couldn't have transparency. We had a movement that liberated us from the militaries, and that had to be all hush-hush, we couldn't leave that. But once you have your democracy, once everybody has the right to say whatever they please, that's the real right we have to. And that's why in the Constitution, there's a right for freedom of speech, but there's not a guaranteed right there that speaks about privacy. Privacy will be, every generation will redefine privacy and will grow on it.
Yeah, I look at glass, and I've had positive reactions every time I wear glass, and the first thing they ask is a privacy question. And I'm really, really happy that this little device has woken a lot of people up to realize there's a lot of cameras on you. This one happens to be on my face. I'm really happy that the conversation is happening. It's a little late, but better late than never. The reality is, just like how you said, there is no privacy. There's no privacy on the internet. I told my students that when I was a college student, there's no evidence that I did anything wrong. But for them, they put it on Facebook. They're like, one kid's like, I love weed, and like, that's not going to get you that job you're looking for. Unlike weed, or at least hide it. So there's that, and then the other thing that I think about is, if you think about banner ads and how obnoxious they were, that was how a lot of news and journalism was funded, banner ads. So there was an industry to block banners, right? Ad blockers, that's an industry. Remember when you got all that spam in your email and you're like, how am I going to deal with this email? Someone invented a spam filter, spam blocker. There's going to be technology that's going to kind of bypass this stuff. Law is great. Law is freaking slow. Clearly technology is faster, and it's going to bypass all that stuff.
I call that like an immune system. We'll develop like an immune system.
There's money in that, right? So how can you opt out of glass? Invent something where all of a sudden you're pixelated. It's going to be passed in Germany first, because that's where all these things are happening. And I agree, too, from the journalistic point of view, everyone is on, whether you like it or not. Whether the camera's on or not, everyone's observing something. So any violation of the law, any abuse of power, someone can share that with one click or a wink with technology now. And that makes it really powerful for a society if done right. I want it to be used with common sense, but common sense isn't very common. So you want people to if this advances our social contract of don't be a jerk, I'm all for it.
Okay, we have a question in the back.
Yeah, I agree about the privacy here. I think we kind of have an outdated view of it. But I think it's going to be more important when it's deeper than wearables, when it's biological.
Sure.
Like if someone can hack your pacemaker or something like that, I think there's much bigger privacy issues there.
They probably can now, but why? I mean, so I got contacted by a news station that was like, breaking news, someone can break into your car with your computer. Yes, your car is a big computer. Breaking news, someone can hack an airplane. Yes, that airplane's a big computer. Pilots aren't really flying. They just said, go here, and it autopilots there. That's going to happen with self-driving cars. Oh, my gosh. There are sensors there already in our cars right now that parallel park for you because you're a bad parallel parker. All those things. Yes, it is very possible. It's also very possible I might get hit by lightning or there's a tumor on the side of my head because of this device. Everything's possible, but I'd rather be proactive in trying to help define those social norms and help define those types of content that allows us to facilitate. I want to help frame the conversation before someone else frames it for us.
So yeah, I think you bring a great subject of implantables, and implantables are going to be the next. So when we're done with this privacy discussion and we all say, okay, there's cameras anywhere, and they're going to be cheaper and they're going to be more available, then we'll probably get into that other discussion.
Okay. We got another question. If I want to try to move on. Yes, sir.
I guess the question is for Brian about the value of IP in this field. There's been a lot of recently issued IP. There's a lot of IP that's very old that's trapped in the patent office, and they're really taking their time. The battles haven't been fought, or the battle lines haven't been fought, or battle lines haven't been drawn in this field yet. I'm of the mind that if people have ownership rights, if you believe in that and in patents, and certainly big companies believe that they do, if small inventors do, and they assert their rights, and it slows down the innovation and it slows down the adoption of the technology to some degree, considering how fast it's moving quickly based on Moore's law. Is that necessarily a bad thing if we want to retain the system of intellectual property ownership that we have here? Or can that be characterized positively in any way, where everybody succeeds from all that work and all those filings and all that invention that's been done in the past that actually is really happening today?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be an IP lawyer if I didn't believe in the IP system. It absolutely exists for a good reason. The right to obtain copyrights and patents is written into our Constitution. It's been there since the beginning. Yeah, there are abuses. There are places where the system falls short. That's true of any political system, any way of governing human behavior. But on the whole, on balance, IP has proven itself to be an effective way of governing property rights and encouraging innovation because people have something to look forward to. I don't need to tell you and the other inventors in the room that if there's no way to protect all your hard work, there's not a whole lot of incentive to put in the hard work in the first place.
Okay, we have another question right over here.
Hi, Hi. You guys really did cover the cameras everywhere thing, so I'm not going to touch on that. You'd mentioned it being Orwellian, and I heard an expression once that little brother is watching you now, and it's kind of true. They're everywhere. I kind of wanted to ask something more about privacy policies. I've been encountering a lot of that with because I've been doing analytics in the apps that I'm making. Simple stuff, but I'm really positive about telling my clients to do that because you really need to study and watch how people are using your apps. However, I also caution them heavily about it's good to have a privacy policy that covers that. And I know privacy policies have been around for a long time, but it's a newer thing. It's more because we're gathering data about people. Well, not necessarily like taking personal information, but like here's how they use the app. But I still think it's a good thing for a company to cover their bases and have that kind of a privacy policy because you're gathering data, basically. And I know there's a lot of new laws cropping up, some in California. I used a service called Augmented to generate a privacy policy for some of the work that I've done. Are you seeing more of that? I mean, how are privacy policies changing in this new era, basically?
The bottom line answer is yes. Privacy policies are a good idea. You should have them. How they're changing, there are a few magic words that belong in a privacy policy, but by and large, the governing rule of thumb for privacy policies is be comprehensive. Make sure you list all the ways that you're gathering information, what you're doing with it, and second, be accurate. Make sure that what you say you're gathering and how you say that you're using it is actually what you're doing. That'll get you 95% of the way there. And everybody here in this room could probably give you a different answer what type of information they're collecting. As a medium, AR engages and collects a different type of information than non-augmented apps would. That's something to take into account when you're drafting those policies. But following the rules of thumb of accurate and comprehensive are the primary things. And in terms of people who are helping you with that, the only other resource I've encountered that I think is a good start is Trustee, TRUSTE.com. That's a good starter privacy policy. But again, with augmented media, you want to go one step further, make sure it accurately describes what you're doing.
Okay, well, I'm going to try to squeeze in 2 more questions, and Brian's not allowed to answer any more questions because he charges $300 an hour. So, just so
more than that.
Is it more than that? Okay, sorry about that. This gentleman right here.
Thank you. Well, I have a question that has nothing to do with privacy, so that's easy. And it actually more has to do something with the future. And I'm quite surprised, actually. I heard it like over the past few days, and today in the panel I heard it again. I actually heard somebody say, follow the money. And it surprises me really, because I think like what's happening and what we're seeing in this current situation with especially artists doing important work, to get these kinds of new technology out in the world, that's so important. I think like following the money is like really a false thing to do in the stage where it is in now. I mean, we need like, I guess, the journalists and the artists, etc. I mean, for example, yesterday there was this fashion show, and there was this woman showed this beautiful dress that was like, if you tweet it, the tweet showed up on the dress. And somebody asked the question, how are you going to sell that? And I was like, what? Then you really didn't get it, I guess. I mean, she was just showing the possibilities. And so I'm not sure if I can put it in a fixed question. Maybe it's an open question, but you guys, think about that for the future, how to get it out into the world, what would be the way to do it, or to, The
way to do it, who knows? But I would say that everyone needs to participate. Everyone needs to proactively shape the conversation. Business people need to be there in order to fund these different things. The person who made that dress needs to pay her rent so she can put that tweet on that dress. It shouldn't be one driver or the other. It can't be all art all the time, because then we're all starving, and we can't afford these things if and when they come out. So it's a good relationship. I like this conference because everyone is here. BC and other folks who do art or doing enterprise businesses, they're coming together and they're learning from each other. I'm just thinking in terms of 20 years from now, and I'm making a joke here, but when Matteo and Daiquiri are in patent troll wars and then they're going to make a movie about Facebook, or they're going to make a movie about whatever. Who's going to play?
Brian Wassom's life.
Yeah, who's going to play? There you go. Who's going to play Brian?
I would go way more with solve a problem or create something new that people will enjoy and love than follow the money. I personally don't believe at all in follow the money. It would never work for me.
We're not good entrepreneurs. I'm a professor. I don't have to worry about my revenue stream.
We're a business. We're a business.
Yeah,
but we still have this philosophy that the solve a problem, that's where the money might be. Even if you want the money in the end, solve a problem that people are willing to pay for a solution.
I was just going to say, just follow your passion. And if you follow your passion and your love, everything else will follow. You know, and you're going to get a roof over your head and a meal. And if you're in this space, you'll probably wind up making a lot of money anyhow. But that wasn't what drove you to what you do. Okay, we have one more question in the back.
Yeah, thanks. I want to bring it back to privacy, sadly. I'm wearing one of these Google glasses, right? And the thing that always strikes me, people think that you're taking photos and videos of them all the time, right? And would it really have killed Google just to put like a red flashing LED when you take a photo? I mean, would it have destroyed the product? I don't think so. And I appreciate that in this room we're all kind of like, you know, we're committed to AR, we all think it's a great thing, but most people out there, you know, they're suspicious of this technology, right? And I think it could really hurt the adoption of Google Glass when it's launched, or other AR glasses, where there's this feeling, you know, that it is something not good if you're not wearing this Google Glass, that, you know, that you have to. I appreciate people like to live in transparency, but not everybody does, right? And just a simple LED would have made such a difference. You know, law's not the answer in here, but it's just rude, right, you know.
Well, so think about this, though. People recognize Google Glass because of that form factor. What's socially acceptable is regular glasses. When someone walks down the street with regular glasses, no one thinks twice. So all the digital eyewear companies recognize this. They're working on waveguide, right, technology to build this information right into the lenses. So what happens when someone's wearing what looks like regular glasses and there's a camera inside it? And if you wanted to be discreet, they build cameras into the lapel of your tie or something like that. So I think it's almost impossible to kind of control it. It's one of those things I think that we're just going to have to deal with.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can't legislate for this. People have been able to use hidden cameras forever. But the point I'm saying is that just a simple kind of like polite thing to have like a flashing light at the moment would be, would help people ease into this kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah, those are lessons, I think, that are being learned. So nobody would expect, because it comes from a very nerd, geeky, technological people. They didn't think those things would happen, and then maybe they're evolving those ideas. And I think personally I grew more respectful of the feeling. I was sitting with a friend 2 days ago, and he's like, it looks like you're looking at me, it looks like you're more powerful than me, it looks like I don't feel comfortable. And we have to start understanding and respecting those things, because these are people's feelings. So as much as I know this is the future and we're going to get over it and all that, I believe, yes, finding ways to be, if someone tells you that, you just take it out or you just put it up, just something that comforts the other person, because we're growing in this together. We have to evolve it.
I also think, too, that, when you have, Google Glass, as new generations come out, if enough people bring up that issue, they're going to listen and they're going to change it, too. So I think that, there's an opportunity, if enough people feel exactly the way you do, that they would make those type of changes because they want to keep their Google Glass wearers, happy and to kind of adjust to that. So, all right, we're pretty much out of time. I think we can go on for another 2 hours, but, you need to get some coffee and that sort of thing. I do want to thank our panel. Thank you so much for spending your time, and it's great to hear your different perspectives.